I welcome each and every one of you here that have come to our Olive Tree Teaching Center, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And those of you that are coming in through our Torah Unleashed YouTube channel, we want to welcome you from all over the world. I want to welcome my family that watches us from different cities here. Want to give a shout out to my grandkids out there and everyone that is listening in. Some of my nephews and nieces, sister-in-law that listens out there, and everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. Shabbat Shalom. Torah Unleashed is a vision that Adonai gave me several years ago when I realized that, we grew up without Torah. We grew up with religion. We grew up with Christianity, with basic stuff. But it seemed that the Torah was tied up, that it was chained up. And I want to unleash, I want to unpack, I want to open up what the word of Adonai has for this generation. And so one of the things that we started with years and years ago was Passover. And so we want to even use the Passover as that way of unleashing Passover, unpacking Passover. What is Passover? Today we are in part 3. We've had 2 weeks of studying it, and today we're going to go even deeper and wider in some of these areas. Now, one of my main teachings that I want to really explain to the world is the idea of one Torah, one tree. One Torah, one tree. One Torah means that there is one Torah for Israel. Now look what I'm saying, Israel. And anyone from the nations, from the Gentiles, who according to Paul in Romans 11:15-17 are grafted into the olive tree of Israel. Remember, notice that I said the olive tree of Israel. Notice also that I didn't say the olive tree of the Jewish people. I'm not talking about Judaism. We're not grafted into Judaism. We're grafted into the olive tree of Israel. And Jew and Gentile who believe in Messiah Yeshua today make up the olive tree of Israel. By the way, Jewish people that do not follow Messiah are not part of the olive tree of Israel, but are dead branches that, according to Paul and according to Jeremiah 11:15-17 also, have been cut off. So they're not part of the tree. They were part of the tree. Now, every one of them could be grafted in. And thank Adonai today, many Jewish branches are getting regrafted back to their original tree where they belong. So pray for the Jewish people that they come back to the olive tree of Israel. Now, there's one tree and one Torah. And every one of us here is part of that one tree. Once you are baptized into Yeshua, you're baptized into Messiah. If you are Jewish, you return. If you're Gentile, you get grafted in. It is baptism, immersion into Messiah that gets you hooked up back to the olive tree or into the olive tree, whether you're Jewish or Gentile. Now, this is part of what I call the Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic faith and doctrine. Adonai calls us to be Mosaic. He calls us to follow Torah, Moses. What does Moses say? Remember what many times they'd ask Yeshua a question, and he would say, what does Moses say? Yeshua always went back to Moses. Yeshua never left Moses. Yeshua always brought us back to what does the Torah say? But again, Yeshua is the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. He has authority. And when Yeshua came here, he says, you have heard it said, yes, but I say. Now, he didn't take what Moses said away, but he actually made it deeper. You have heard it said, thou shalt not murder. But I say to you, if you have hatred, you've committed murder. And he didn't take murder away. Murder is still murder, and that's a crime, a sin. But he brought it to its level of where does it begin. And Yeshua did that with many things. And of course, he gave his life, and the Mosaic is in the Gospels. The Messianic is in the Gospels. But he sent 11 men, commissioned 11 men, ordained 11 men, appointed 11 men, whom he called apostles or sent ones. He sent them out so that they could go into the whole world and disciple those that had been immersed into him. And the epistles and Acts and the epistles and Revelation are all apostolic writings. And faith and doctrine is found in Moses, in Messiah, and in the apostles. Our faith is found there. It's not found outside of these writings. There's other writings that are outside of Genesis to Revelation. Writings that many people even call gospels or epistles, and many of them are spurious. They're not real. And of course, there's all kinds of other books that have been found that bring people into different kinds of heresies and false doctrines. It is in the Bible, in the scriptures, that we find everything. Now, one of the things that in coming to understand Passover, here is a genealogy, my genealogy from my dads and grandfathers and grandmothers and great-great-grandfathers, great-great-great-great-grandmothers that go up to Rabbi Judah Halevi. Now, some of you that are here can find some of your lines over here because this is a New Mexico line, and so some of these people are related to you here in New Mexico. And if you're listening from any place in New Mexico, Texas, because some of these go back to Texas and to different parts of Monterrey in Nuevo León. And I have Dr. Del Sanchez, who helped me with this, is my cousin. He grew up in San Antonio. And so we have some of these same lines here with many of you. Well, why am I bringing this up? Because according to Torah, according to Moses, he said that we were going to be scattered. We're going to be scattered throughout the world. But in the Acharit Chayamim, in the last days, he says, I am going to bring you back. We lost so much. We were into the nations, Moses said. You're going to be in the nation. You're going to be following false gods and other gods and other. But in the last days, I'm going to bring you back. You see, Adonai said to your descendants. One thing about Passover is he says what? To your descendants. Well, technically, yes, I have in my DNA, I have Iberian, Celtic Iberian. Through some of my grandmothers, I have Native American. And I have other little bits and pieces of this and that. We're all Heinz 57. In a sense, we're all a little mutts. But in tracing my line, when I traced my line and started going up and found out that I was a descendant of Rabbi Judah Halevi, knowing that his family, where his family came, then I said, you know what? Adonai through Moses said to Moses, yeah, they're going to be scattered. Because of unbelief, they're going to be scattered. But I'm going to bring them back. In 1977, when I heard the shofar for the first time, and Adonai woke me up through that shofar sound, I came back. And throughout the years, I've been coming back more and more and more and more. And the Passover, the Pesach, is one of those things that has been like a hook in my life. I was a Catholic priest when I started studying about the Mass and Passover and all these things. And I remember asking my bishop, can we do a Passover? And of course, he said no. This was in the middle 70s. And after that, when I resigned and started and this congregation, I started doing Passovers. But I started doing them the way everybody did them. I started doing them according to the rabbinic way, according to Judaism. And the Messianic Judaisms of the time were saying, this is the way you do them, so we started doing them that way. Since then, I've transitioned to do it, yes, mosaically, messianically, and apostolically. That we go back to all three. Not take one, not do that, but come back. And I'm calling everyone, especially if you have descent. You might only have 1%. But even if you have 1%, what does that say? That means that someone up there, up the line, was Jewish. And if you have that 1%, then you are a descendant. And as a descendant, we have responsibilities to follow what the Torah says. So it's time to return. Well, today we're going to look at protocols for a Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic Passover Seder. What are the protocols? What can we do? What can we not do? How do we prepare? And especially for those of you that might be doing this for the first time, or some of you that might be Christian pastors, some of you, what I would encourage is talk to your pastor and say, can we learn about Passover? What is Passover? And your pastors and even Messianic rabbis, because some of these Messianic rabbis have come from one of the Judaisms out there, Reform, Conservative, or whatever. And some of the Christian pastors come from the different Christianities out there, the Catholics, the Baptists, the Reformed. And so they have some of their traditions and they hybrid them with Passover. Part of my responsibility is to, hey, let's unpack this. Let's put everyone in their place and let's see what Adonai wants for us. What does Adonai want for us? Well, look at this. We have the Mosaic Passover, the Exodus, the sacrifice of the lamb on Passover night. Now, I want you to notice this, that the Passover of Yeshua is the direct descendant of the Passover of Moses. The Passover of Yeshua on Passover night. We saw that last week. When they had come, they asked him, where do you want us to do the Passover? And Yeshua told them they did the Passover. When the hour came for Passover, they did Passover. Yeshua did Passover. Yeshua's Passover is the true Passover. Now, from the Passover of Yeshua, we have two hybrids. We have the hybrid of the rabbinic Passover and the hybrid of the Passover in the Christianities out there, whether they be Catholic, Protestant, different out there. We have those hybrids. They're not descendant from the Mosaic. Yeah, they have bits and pieces, both of them, of Yeshua's and of Moses, but they're hybrids. But the Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic Passover that I'm discovering and want to teach is a direct descendant of Yeshua's Passover. So we want to go to Moses, to Yeshua, and get Moses and Yeshua and what the apostles said, especially Paul, and make it into that Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic Passover. This is what my vision is to do. Let's bring it together. Now, why should we conduct a Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic Seder? The Torah commands every male to keep Passover. And I'm talking about descendants. I'm talking about those that are grafted in. Remember, when you are grafted in, Paul says in Romans 11:15-17, when you are grafted in, you feed off the sap provided by the roots. You feed off Torah. You don't bring your Gentileisms in. The grafted in tree and the fruit it produces comes from the sap provided by the root system. So if you are Jewish and you've been baptized into Messiah, if you're from the Gentile nations and baptized into Yeshua, immersed into Yeshua, then we have to keep Passover. The sons of Israel must keep the Passover at its appointed time. Notice, underline that, it's appointed time. Not cuando quieras, whenever you want. There's an appointed time. The 14th of this month. See, that's why it's important that we follow a biblical protocol of when does the new year start? When is the biblical Rosh Hashanah? Now, we have the equinox, and the first crescent moon on the western horizon after the spring equinox is the biblical Rosh Hashanah, the biblical New Year. Exodus 12, 1-3. And you will count 14 days. So we count 14 days from the New Year at twilight when the sun goes down. You will keep it with all the protocols. There's protocols to it, customs proper to it. We must keep Passover. Keeping Passover is not optional. Of course, the Jews say, well, we keep the Passover Seder. The Christians say, well, we keep Passover, and they call it the Mass, the Lord's Supper, the Lord's Table, Holy Communion, breaking bread, different. Everybody says they do it. But watch this. Do they do it according to their traditions, or they do it according to the biblical protocols? That's the key. We must do Passover according to the biblical protocols. Now, Passover today is not only remembering the Exodus when our people were delivered out of Egypt, but the most important thing is remembering Yeshua. It's about Yeshua. For Messiah, our Passover, has been sacrificed. Let us keep the feast. See, at that time, they were keeping the feast because Yeshua was the Passover. The imagery of Yeshua being the Passover that Yochanan, the immerser, John the Baptist, says, behold, the Lamb of Elohim who takes away the sin of the world. John pointed to Yeshua. He is the Lamb of Elohim that takes away, not covers, the sin of the world, but takes away the sin of the world. And he is the Lamb of Passover. Therefore, let us keep the feast. Paul says, let us keep the feast. Hasn't been obliterated. Hasn't been abolished. Hasn't been taken away. Yeah, for all these years, it was stolen. It was locked up. It was lost. But we're restoring what the moth has eaten, what Satan has, in a sense, forbid the believers in Yeshua to follow for 2,000 years through religion. Well, it's time to get rid of religion and come back to faith and doctrine that is biblical. What if you don't keep Passover? Is Passover optional for the believer? Well, look how Adonai, when he gave it, how adamant he was about it. They will keep it following the entire Passover ritual. Passover's a ritual. There's protocols, there's order, it's a service. The word Seder means a service, means a liturgy. There is an order. They will keep it, but anyone who fails to keep the Passover, such a person will be excommunicated from his people. They will keep it following the entire Passover ritual. But if anyone fails to keep the Passover, such a person will be excommunicated from his people. Now look at that. According to Adonai, if you don't keep Passover, you'll be excommunicated. Now remember what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That if you keep Passover in an unworthy manner, you could die. You could be excommunicated. But if you don't keep Passover, you could be excommunicated also from his people for not having brought the offering to Yahweh at its appointed time. At the appointed time. That person will bear the consequences of the sin. We are commanded to keep Passover. And it is considered sin not to keep Passover. So what do? Well, what we need to do is learn what Passover is all about. We need to keep it according to a biblical format, according to biblical protocols, and not according to the Judaisms or the Christianities, but according to what Adonai teaches and says. Now, the original and all subsequent biblical Passovers were conducted at home. As such, it is our goal, and this has been my goal for many, many years now, to train every male head of house to conduct a Messianic, a Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic Seder. Passover is not a synagogue or church service. It is a male head of house who should conduct the Seder, not the Cohen, the priest, the rabbi, or the pastor. Passover is not a sacerdotal duty. Now, many congregations hold congregational Passovers. I do not adhere to having congregational Passovers. Why? Because when you have a congregational Passover, some of the things that occur there is that everybody's invited. Anybody's invited. In fact, sometimes they try to make it evangelical and invite your non-Christian friends. Invite your non-believing friends and let them come over. No, wait, this is not for unbelievers. This is for believers only. This is an in-house. It's not it's an in-house place. It's only for those that are part of the body of Messiah, baptized, walking in the Spirit. Because remember what we said. If you partake of the bread and the wine in an unworthy manner, you are guilty and you are not worthy, and you could be weak, ill, and Paul says some have died. And so it's a very serious thing. Passover is serious. It's not something that anyone could just say, oh, let's just do one. Now, how do we conduct it? The time is the 14th of Aviv at sundown. The 14th of Aviv at sundown. Not 2-3 days before, not 2-3 days after. Not on a Wednesday night because more people will come on that night. Not on a Sunday morning. On the 14th of Aviv at sundown. Part 1 is the sacrifice, the Korban Pesach, when in the first Passover they sacrificed the lamb at home in front of the front door, and they put the blood on the doorposts and lintels of the house. Subsequent Passovers were sacrificed at the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and later on in Solomon and Herod's temples. Well, we don't do that no more. It is finished. We don't do that no more. There's no temple. There's no priesthood. But we start with part 2 of the Passover, which is called the order of service, the Seder, the Haggadah, which means the reading from Exodus 12. We bring a shank bone, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. That's all. That's all that is in the plate. And after we do the ritual, the protocols, then we have a meal. Any kosher meal as desired. And then there is part 3. There is part 3. Part 3 is the after supper part. And now and I don't know where the guys are back there. We'll just... Part 3 is the after supper, which is called the Master's Banquet. Here we have the Afikomen, that he shall come, and the cup of blessing, the third cup. And this third part is the actual part that is the Master's Banquet, or what Paul calls the Kuriaken Chadaipon, the Lord's Supper in King James or English, but in Hebrew, the banquet of the Master. And the Afikomen is the bread that Yeshua said, this is my body. And the third cup is the cup that he said, this is my blood. Now remember what I said. It is the father, the husband, the male head of household that does this. In Judaism, they follow that strict biblical guideline. That's why they're a hybrid. They follow what Moses said, but then they add and take away. In the Christianities, what they do is they actually take most of this stuff away, and someone has to be ordained to do this. Someone has to be a pastor, a priest. They have to be a minister. And of course, they do it what's called high church, which is like Roman Catholic and Episcopalian, or low church, Baptist. Some are very ornate with a lot of vestments and gold chalices. Some are very simple. Some use wine and unleavened bread. Some use grape juice and leavened bread in the different Christianities. And so people do this differently. But it's time to come back to what Scripture says. It's time to learn that there are protocols that need to be followed. Now, the three aspects of Passover are the unleavened bread, the shank bones, and the bitter herbs. Of course, unleavened bread is just unleavened cakes. And the shank bones, in biblical times, this is when they ate the lamb. They ate at least a olive size chunk of lamb, which they took as communion, some bread as communion, and bitter herbs as communion. It was just a protocol of just communions like that. Today, because we have no temple, we have no priesthood, well, we can't sacrifice a lamb, and don't anybody sacrifice lambs today. So we just put shank bones as a reminder that at this time there was a lamb that was eaten. And so today we only have the bread and the bitter herbs. And for bitter herbs, you could use whatever you'd like. Anything that is bitter, anything that is spicy, anything that would elicit maybe a cough or where many people choke on it, because that's what life was in Egypt, bitter. And of course, the shank bone. And the cup of wine, which in biblical times is a symbol of celebration and joy. Now, there is a secret to Passover. And what's interesting is most Christians don't know about this secret. But in the Jewish world, they know about this secret. They know what they're doing, but they don't know why they're doing it. They're doing something, but they don't know why they're doing it. Now, followers of Messiah know why the Jews, are doing it. And the Christians in the Christianities don't know anything about this. And it's the secret of the matzatosh and the afikomen. What is the matzatosh? The matzatosh is a plate with 3 pieces of matzah that are separated by linen napkins, or a tosh is a bag, where you have one bag with 3 compartments. And in each of the 3 compartments, there is a piece of matzah. The matzah tosh is called the echad. The echad. Now, it's not called the yachatz. It's called the echad. Echad means one in a sense of combination. One, like it says, the 2 shall become one. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, and the 2 shall become echad. They don't become each other, but they are one together. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Hear, O Israel. Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. We have the 3 in 1, what we call the Trinity. And this echad is a trifold napkin or bag, 3 pockets, 3 pieces of matzah. The middle matzah is broken in half and put in a second napkin and hidden. Now, what's interesting is that this is called the 3-in-1. And you take the middle matzah out. Now, in the Judaisms, when you ask the rabbis, why is there 3? Oh, this represents the Cohens, the priest, the Leviim, the Levites, and Ha'am, the people of Israel, Ha'am Israel. Or, this represents Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, why are the Levites taken out and broken in half? We don't know. Why is Isaac taken out and broken in half? We don't know. But in our Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic understanding, we know why. Because there's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And the Son is taken out and he's broken in half. And what's interesting, when we break the middle matzah in half, we use the first part to consume when we're eating it with bitter herbs. The second half, we wrap up in a napkin and we hide it away, we bury it. We have an understanding that Yeshua comes inside of us, but we also have an understanding that Yeshua died and was buried. Now, this second is called the afikomen. Now, afikomen is not a Hebrew word. It's a Greek word. Moses, the prophets, and the writings are written in Hebrew. There's no afikomen in the Hebrew protocols. But Yeshua said, I am going, but I am coming again. It is Yeshua who is coming again. The He shall come. The afikomen from the middle bread is retrieved after supper. Now, what's interesting, when supper ends in the ancient world, in the biblical Passover of Moses, it ended. After supper, it ended. Yeshua does something interesting. Yeshua adds a third part to the Passover ritual. A third part. And that third part, it says after supper, when supper had ended, when the Passover had ended, Yeshua takes bread, leftover bread, and another cup, a third cup, because a Passover, any celebration begins with a cup of sanctification and a cup of ending, like giving a toast at the end. So they lift up the cup formally. Now they could drink in between, but they lift up a cup. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri chagafen. Blessed are you, Adonai, King of the universe. You've given us the fruit of the vine. And then it ends the same way with a toast. L'chaim. It's over with. Yeshua now takes a third cup. Yeshua begins a third part that the Jewish people at that time in the Second Temple period had not known. That even the disciples had not known. They'd been celebrating Passover since they were kids. And their eyes must have opened and said, what? And Yeshua takes this bread, this leftover bread, and says, this is my body given for you. As often as you eat this, remember me. And of course, he took the cup again after supper and said, this is my blood, which is given for you. Now, what's interesting is that Yeshua started this ritual. And for 40 years, until the destruction of the temple, they celebrated part 1, part 2, and part 3. The Jews were only celebrating part 1 and part 2. But after the destruction of the temple, remember Yeshua prophesied that. Yeshua said not one stone is going to be left standing upon another on this temple. Yeshua prophesied that. In 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, you could not do part 1 anymore. So the Jews did part 2. The believers did part 2 and part 3. But watch this. One of the things that occurred is that the Jewish world started doing part 3. Now, when the Gentiles came in, the Gentiles took out part 2. So Christianity only did part 3, whereas the Jews did part 2 and part 3. Isn't it interesting? So today, we want to restore part 2 and part 3. We can't do part 1 still until we have a temple and Passover and priesthood. Now, the first historic use of the term afikomen appears in what has been called a Christian Passover Haggadah. This was written by a Hellenistic, which means Greek-speaking Jewish believer. He was a Greek-speaking Jewish believer. And this was written about 175 of the Common Era, AD 175. Now he calls Yeshua Christos, of course, that's the Greek word for Messiah, Christos. And he says this is the one who is coming out of heaven. And he uses the word in Greek, hutos afikomenos ex oranon, to the earth. So it was a Hellenistic Jewish Messianic believer who uses the word for the first time, afikomenos, for Yeshua. And if you read the book of John, the Gospel of John, Yeshua says, I am coming again. He's the sent one. He's the one coming into the world. So it was the early Messianic community who began through Yeshua, the third part, and the use of the coming one, the leftover bread, to make Yeshua. At the beginning of the Passover meal, there is a yachatz where it is broken. It is broken in half. Half of it is put in a napkin, and the other half is eaten as a communion with the bitter herbs and the unleavened bread. Of course, today we have a shank bone there. And he's doing the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haloam chamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Adonai, King of the universe. You've given us bread from the earth. By the way, notice that they are looking up. In biblical times, when you did blessings and prayer, you didn't close your eyes and bow your head. You actually opened your eyes and you looked up. And that's how they prayed and did blessings in biblical times. Now, Yeshua did this after supper. We call it the Master's Banquet. Now, fathers, this is what you do. The father takes the bread, the afikomen, the he shall come, and says the blessing. Then afterwards, Yeshua takes the cup and says the blessing. Now, this is the cup of blessing that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 10. Now, if you want to learn this, come on Wednesday nights, and right before Passover, I always do a Passover presentation of this is what you do and this is what you need, and you'll do it here. a presentation so that you could learn. So make sure you know when we're doing that. After supper, and the cup of the Brit Kadeshah, the new covenant in my blood. This is the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you. I will make a new covenant. And here's where the new covenant is ratified. Now, this wasn't a Tuesday night, by the way. Yeshua did his Passover on a Tuesday night. Look, the days are coming, Yahweh declares, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. But not like the covenant I made with their ancestors the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. A covenant which they broke even though I was their husband, Yahweh declares. No, this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel when those days come. Within them I will plant my Torah, writing it on their hearts. Then I shall be their Elohim, and they will be my people. The new covenant is the Torah, not written on tablets of stone, but written in the tablets of our heart. If you've been baptized into Messiah, if you've been baptized into Yeshua, then the Torah is written in your heart. So why not follow it? Why not do it? Why do we have to do all these hybrid stuff, all this extra stuff, additions and subtractions from the Word? Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. And let us consider one another to encourage unto love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves. By the way, that was our parashah for today. The assembling, the kahal, the ecclesia, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. As we see that day approaching, we need to learn. Let's come together, especially let's start with Pesach. Let's start with Passover. Now, since the new covenant, since Yeshua did, there's what we call historic Passovers. And the last Passover, the last Mosaic Passover sacrifice occurred on April 3rd of 70 AD. By the way, it's possible that Passover is going to be on April 3rd this year again, and depending on the moon. After this, Titus, the Roman prince, destroyed the temple, and the sacrificial grace system came to an end. So since 70 of the Common Era, we haven't had Passover. We've had Passover Seders, no part 1, only part 2, and the Jews part 2 and Yeshua's part 3. Can you imagine? The Jews are doing Yeshua's ritual. But the Christians only do part 3. So no more Passovers since then. Now the Pharisees' Passover, the Passover of the Pharisees, is the birth of Judaism. So Judaism was born between 70 AD and the year 200 and 500, 1200s, with the Mishnah, the Talmud, and Maimonides, and all those other people. They don't have a temple. The Jews don't have a lamb, no blood. By the way, they do theirs not on the 14th of Aviv, they do theirs on the 15th of Nisan. Nisan and Aviv is the same month, except Aviv is biblical, Nisan is Babylonian. They do the second Seder, Haggadah, unleavened bread, bitter herbs with a supper. And they add the third part, the Yeshuic, Messianic third part. Now, the Mishnah, the Talmud, and Rabbinic theology from 200 to the present is what we call the growth of the oral law. They do part 2, but they add to that traditions and laws. They add an egg. They add parsley. They add 4 cups of wine, which wine was used, but not 4 cups per person. It was 4 cups per table, not per person. And of course, they add prayers, and they do an after supper, part 3. Where did part 3 came into theirs? From the Messianic early believers. They do the afikomen as Yeshua did. They do it in what's called the Passover Haggadah, and this is a common Haggadah that is used out there, and this is their protocols for that. Their Seder plate, bitter herb, shank bone, charoset, lettuce, parsley, egg, matzah bread with 4 cups of wine per person, by the way. And here's a traditional Passover plate of Judaism and rabbinic Judaism. Now, please don't do this. This is not biblical. So I'm actually teaching everyone here how to do the Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic, and we'll teach you on a Wednesday night so you know what to do, the right protocols and not the wrong protocols. Of course, the Catholic Passover is the first day of the week on Sunday. In the Catholic Church, Passover Day is Easter Sunday or Ishtar Day, the day when this, I won't even say that, false goddess is worshipped. And of course, they don't do part 1 or part 2. There's no supper. You don't eat when you go to Mass. They only do the cup and the bread. And so all Protestants follow Rome, by the way. Every Protestant church follows Rome to some degree. Of course, it's first day of the week, Sunday, Easter or Ishtar Day. And now some of them are starting to call it Resurrection Sunday or Resurrection Day. And no part 2, part 1, no supper, only cup and bread, Holy Communion. Again, this is not authorized by Yeshua. The Catholic system is not authorized. The Protestant system is not authorized. So what do? Well, do a Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic. Of course, Christian Passovers, same thing, except that in Christians, they usually use leavened bread. Some people use unleavened, but most people use leavened, and they either call it the Lord's table or breaking bread. Now, Messianic Passovers are gaining traction. Churches are conducting Seder. Some Christian groups come to your Christian church, and they'll do a Christ in the Passover service. They do a traditional Jewish with a Christian flair, a little Yeshua thrown in there for good measure. While this might seem cool, a lot of people say, oh man, I went to a Passover Seder. Oh, that was cool. There's grave complications. Why? Because Passover is not a public demonstration. It's for those that are on the inside. The Passover is not an evangelistic outreach. Misinformed Christian and or Messianic churches and some Jewish organizations have been using the Passover Seder as an outreach promotion. Paul's teaching in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 should warn the body of Messiah that this manner of outreach is not biblical. The Passover Seder is a meal of remembrance of Egypt and of Yeshua. This is not an outreach ministry. In the millennial kingdom, Yeshua will rebuild the 4th temple. Remember, the temple that they want to build today is the 3rd temple. That's not Yeshua's temple. That's not Ezekiel's temple. Yeshua will build Ezekiel's temple. And believers will celebrate the Passover. Everyone, every believer in the millennium will celebrate Shabbat and the 7 feasts. On the 14th day of the first month, you must celebrate the feast of Passover. For 7 days, everybody must eat unleavened bread. And of course, he says this about all the feasts. Two plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 2 does not equal 5. 2 plus 2 does not equal 3. We cannot add or take away from Moses, from Yeshua, from Paul. We must follow the biblical patterns exactly. Now here's Leonardo da Vinci's with the Last Supper. His Last Supper it's a day. They're eating fish. They're eating leavened bread. Passover was at night. They ate lamb, unleavened bread. And there's other problems with this. Easter originated in Rome under Pope Sextus, about 116 to 135. The new custom was introduced in Jerusalem by the new Greek bishops. In 135, up to 135, all the bishops of Jerusalem, James, the brother of Yeshua, being the first one, to 135, 100 years afterwards, all the bishops of Jerusalem were related to Yeshua, nephews, grandnephews, until 135, when Hadrian destroyed Jerusalem, and now Greeks and Romans became the bishops. Now they started bringing in Greek and Roman customs. The bishop of Cyprus writes, a controversy arose after the time of the Exodus, 135, when they had to leave Jerusalem, of the bishops of the circumcision, in other words, Jewish bishops, and it has continued until our time. So there was already a controversy at that time of when do you celebrate Passover? How is it done? Do you do it on the 14th? And this led up to a controversy. Eusebius, the historian, talks about true Christians observing Passover on the 14th of Nisan, and he uses that word, first month of the biblical calendar. So in the first centuries, believers were still doing this. All the parishes in all Asia, from the older tradition, held the 14th day of the moon, like we do, like we want to return to, on which the Jews were commanded to sacrifice the lamb. That should be observed as the feast of the Savior's Passover. The bishops of Asia, led by Polycritus, decided to hold to the old custom handed down to them. By the way, from John to these guys, in a letter which he addressed to Pope Victor, we observe the exact day, neither adding nor taking away. Look what he says. He should know 2 plus 2. Philip, John, Polycarp, Thesaurus, Melito, all these observed the 14th day of the Passover according to the gospel, deviating in no respect but following the rule of faith. Look at that. They were still doing it 100, 200 years later. And this led to what's called the Quattrodeciman controversy, meaning the 14th day. Quattrodeciman means the 14th day. And they call themselves the 14ers. We're a 14er group. We're a Quattrodeciman group. Again, there was this controversy between the bishops and some of the believers, and of course Rome won. So to this day, Rome and all of Rome's children, all the Protestants, follow the Roman way. And of course, it was the first council of Nicaea in 325 determined that Easter should always fall on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the vernal equinox, which is almost like ours, but they follow it after the first full moon. Constantine says that the feast Passover ought to be kept by all in every place on one and the same day. In the celebration of this most holy feast, we should not follow the practice of the Jews. Not follow the practice of the Jews, who have impiously defiled their hands with enormous sin. For we have it in our power. Look at that. We have it in our power to abandon their custom. It's not their custom, it's biblical Mosaic law. Let us have nothing to do in common with the detestable Jewish crowd. Let us withdraw ourselves from all participation in their baseness. The audacity of Constantine to treat biblical faith and doctrine with such words. But we're returning, and we encourage everyone to return. Abandon all these Catholic and Protestant traditions. Abandon them. I say the opposite. And let's come back to biblical faith and doctrine. Of course, Lent and Easter are pagan days. Ezekiel 8, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark? They say, Yahweh cannot see us. He next took me to the north gate of the temple of Yahweh, where women were sitting, weeping for Tammuz, the son of Ishtar. Led me away to the inner court of the temple of Yahweh, where about 25 men, with their backs to Yahweh's sanctuary. You never turn your back. And their faces towards the east. They were facing the east before the rising sun. They were having a sunrise service on Easter Day. Weeping for Tammuz on Ishtar Day. These were Jewish elders. And this got Ezekiel sick. Should make us sick too. There is no such thing as Easter sunrise service. Shalom. Let's stand. Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to be here today. We pray that your Ruach HaKodesh might allow each and every one of us, Father, to be able to return to biblical faith and doctrine, to follow Moses, to follow Messiah Yeshua, to follow the apostles, to follow a one Torah, one tree way of life. Yeberechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha. Ayir Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or torahunleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day.